Okay, this movie is so far under the radar. By the title, most of you are probably going to think this is about some DC Comics superhero. Okay, everybody, I've been talking about this motion picture for quite some time, saying I was going to review it, saying I was going to get there. Well, the day is finally here. Today we are talking about 1979's Nightwing. Oh man, this is a forgotten little classic. Well, kind of classic that you need to know a little bit more about. Anyway, before we could go any further, before we dig into this gem anymore, once and again, and as always, to the trailer.
What is it that you fear the most? Is it the dark? Or is it something that waits in the dark? Something so perfect in its evil that it has remained unchanged since the beginning of time. Something that has no fear of man. Something out there, waiting for the light to fade. Nightwing.
Let Chee find out what bled your animal to death. Made bite marks no one's ever seen, and left a stink of ammonia.
I filled the sky. It was like the end of the world.
And each species of life gives something in return for its own existence. All but one, a freak. The vampire bat alone is that species.
Nightwing.
Alright, this motion picture was directed by Arthur Hiller. Pretty good resume, if I may say. We're talking about he did Silver Streak. He did The In-Laws, and Author, and The Lonely Guy, and Romantic Comedy, and Plaza Suite, if anybody remembers that, and Love Story, and The Man of La Mancha. A lot of TV, too, you know, Perry Mason, Gunsmoke. So, good track record. There's some titles you know, remember, should know, should remember. Is what it is. Let's keep going. Okay, playing Youngman Duran, we're talking about Nick Mancuso. He's been in a couple movies I've already reviewed in the past. Going to bring him back to light today. We're talking about he was in Death Ship. He was in things like Rapid Fire with the one and only Brandon Lee. He was in Blame It on the Night and Under Siege and The Invader and Regression and The Performance and on TV, you know, and Call of the Wild and a little forgotten TV show that nobody remembers, Stingray. Is what it was. Playing Phillip Payne, the one, the only, the recently departed, David Warner. Let's do this. We're talking about, he was in a classic you know I love, Time After Time. He was in Tron and Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country and The Island and Titanic and Waxwork and In the Mouth of Madness and The Lost World and Concorde, Airport 79. Come on, you guys gotta remember that. In The Fixer, in The Omen. So he was in so many things. It ain't even funny, for God's sakes. Let's keep going. Playing Anne, Kathryn Harrold. Name you don't really hear about that much anymore, but she was around at the time. We're talking about she was in little things like Raw Deal, and The Hunter. Remember that thing with Steve McQueen? Not bad flick. In Modern Romance, in The Pursuit of D.B. Cooper, and Yes, Giorgio, which, God help us all on that one. And she was on TV too, you know, Chicago Hope, and The Larry Sanders Show, and Magruder and Loud, if anybody remembers that thing. We're talking about, so that's been all but forgotten. Anyway, let's keep going. And playing Walter Chee, Stephen Macht. Now, beyond the fact that he was supposed to be Jean-Luc Picard in Star Trek The Next Generation, it just didn't work out, he was in a bunch of other little gems. We're talking Graveyard Shift. We're talking Galaxina and The Monster Squad and tons of TV. You know, General Hospital, One Life to Live, Murder, She Wrote, Cagney and Lacey, Knots Landing. If you were alive between like 74 and like 90, you've seen this guy everywhere. Plus, there's a whole bunch of other actors and faces you're going to remember in this thing that popped up around in other things. Let's get rolling. We're talking about those people in this thing like Ben Piazza, who was on Dynasty, and Santa Barbara, and Benson, and Strother, and Martin. Come on. Slapshot, The Wild Bunch, Cool Hand Luke. Oh, we have here some failure to communicate. Anyway, Charles Hallahan from The Thing, and Dante's Peak, and George Clutesi. I know I didn't pronounce that right. But anyway, he was in Prophecy and Running Brave. And he plays Abner. You'll see what I'm talking about. And Pat Corley, come on. Murphy Brown, The Hand. So, there's all kinds of faces. There's all kinds of little parts in here being occupied by like, hey, I know. It's just the way it is. Let's get going to the story. Okay, we're going to do this in 90 seconds or less. So we can keep it short, keep it fast, keep it entertaining, keep it moving, so we get to where we would much rather be. The summation. You have these horses out on a ranch, and they don't look too good, to say the least. They're just laying around. Apparently they are dead, and they have been attacked and bitten by something. So the rancher calls in the resident deputy of the Maskey tribe, and that is Youngblood Duran himself, Nick Mancuso, to you and me. And he's there. He can't figure out what's going on. He's never seen bites like this. He's never seen anything like this. And just at that moment, a helicopter arrives, and it has the chief of the Bahana, and he is there to, well, basically clash with Youngblood Duran on everything. You see, he wants to bring in oil companies and pillage the land, but make everybody money, and Youngman, he's a little bit more traditional, whatever, what have you. Anyway, neither one of them can figure out what the hell is going on. It's all weird to them. After leaving there, Youngman stops by this old man Abner's hut, and Youngman Duran is the only person who will literally talk to this guy. Everybody else is afraid of him. They think he's crazy. Well, Abner tells Youngman Duran, I have unleashed a curse. I have set forth a prophecy where basically everybody's going to die, just the way it goes. It is what it is. Enough said. Young man leaves, whatever, and he goes and visits his girlfriend, who happens to be the working doctor medic, call her what you will, on the Maskey Reservation, and she breaks some bad news to him. She's been accepted to Baylor University, and she's going to be leaving. This is not a happy day in their lives, folks. It's not a happy day. Anyway, the next day, young man goes back to visit Abner and finds out he is dead. But when he finds him there, he also happens to find David Warner doing some tissue samples and all other kind of crap. Basically, because he knows that there's vampire bats running around killing people, and they basically took it to Abner too. It is what it is. After that, young man takes Abner. He takes him to the mountains. He buries him, but before he buries him, he sees that the body is bleeding from within. Whatever, he's still bleeding even though he's dead, whatever. And then before you know it, holy shit, later on, Abner's body disappears. Woo! Shit's getting weird. In the middle of all this, his girlfriend, who's soon to be leaving, take it what you will, takes a bunch of religious people out into the desert where they are promptly attacked by bats, and then she turns up missing. At the same time, a bunch of chiefs that were praying on the ground, they turn out to be dead from the bubonic plague. Oh, wow. Now we got some other plots going on. It is what it is. But in the middle of all that, Walker Chee and Youngman Duran have a disagreement about how to handle this, how to warn people. It is what it is. Walker says, I'm going to help you, but tries to arrest Youngman in the morning. Youngman takes off, goes out to the desert, teams up with David Warner, rescues his girlfriend, and takes on the giant bat colony that is looking to overtake planet Earth. Whatever, it is what it is. That's basically the gist of it. You get the idea. Nothing crazy, nothing special. I kind of gave you everything you need to know. Let's just get going to the summation. All right, everybody. Does Nightwing work? Yeah, yes and no. There's problems, I'm not going to lie, but it's still a movie I would say works. Before we get going into any more of it, let's take a look at the big three. The directing is stunning. This motion picture looks beautiful. Simply put, it really does. I don't care what moment of the motion picture you're in, the whole thing looks beautiful. Well, except for one scene I'll explain later. But the rest of it looks absolutely beautiful. The scenery, the settings, the framing. Hiller did a great job making this thing look more than what it was, and it really comes across that way on the screen. The writing's good. The dialogue is solid. It's actually really, really solid. Surprisingly more so than you would think in a motion picture like this. And if you look at its contemporary counterparts at the time, this one really might even stand above the rest. There's flaws with it still, but the writing isn't bad. The acting, you got a solid cast in this thing. Come on. You got Nick Mancuso, usually turns in a good solid performance. You got David Warner, come on, how much more could you want than that? And Stephen Macht, listen man, yes, he did a lot of goofy television work on soap operas and shit like that, but that guy was a good actor and should not be underestimated. So you had a good cast in this thing, and the acting is actually above par. So let's get back on track about what makes this movie work and what doesn't make this movie work. Well, what makes the movie work is what I just told you. It's beautiful to look at, kind of a fun story, really solid acting, and, well, you know, it was one of those motion pictures of its time. And when I say that, I mean there was a rash of these motion pictures of that time. And this one is fun to revisit because it fits in with that rash of motion pictures. You remember Dogs, Bugs, Piranha, Jaws, Orca, everything on planet Earth around this period in time just went apeshit crazy and launched a revolution. That's basically what happened. I mean, Empire of the Ants. I'm talking about Kingdom of the Spiders. There was so many of them at that time that cropped up in a short period of time that this was just another one in the field. So it makes it kind of fun to go say, hey, what can we go look at with Bats? What can we go see that was at that time, of that time, starring a good cast with a good director? That literally is fun to watch, mostly. And by mostly, what do I mean? Are there problems with this motion picture? Well, sure there's problems with this motion picture. And let me just get them out of the way before I go back and revisit why you should watch it again. Yes, this motion picture is a little bit slow. It's like an hour and 45 minutes, and for this kind of a motion picture, an hour and 45 minutes, unless you're really keeping it ramped up and the pacing going, that could be a little bit long. And that's another thing with this motion picture. This motion picture doesn't really have that much horror in it for a horror movie. I mean, literally, you're only going to see the bats very little. You only see really one attack on a group of people, and then a bunch of them on a fence where the people inside just electrocute them. And then at the end, they're just kind of hanging out in a cave. You don't really see that much horror or that much action, I should say, over the course of the hour and 45 minutes. It's literally like just 2 or 3 little things, and you're like, okay, it's going to be another 35 minutes before a little event happens, or another 35 minutes before another small event happens. And that kind of hurt the pacing of this motion picture. It's one of those movies that if you're looking for a jolt every 10 minutes, you are not going to get it. And let's be honest, those times when you do get a jolt, remember how I said the motion picture looked really good? It was beautiful to look at. Well, the one scene where the campers, the Christian group, I don't know who they were, but you know, his girlfriend was taking him out into the desert to hang out and sing whatever. The scene where they get attacked is brutally bad looking. You could tell they went from being on a location to being on a set. You could tell the special effects in it were just horrifically bad. It was one of those scenes where you're just like, oh my God, I mean, Piranha even made the shit look better than this. I mean, how did they screw this up this bad? It is what it is. It's one of those things where you have to just pull yourself out of the fact that the special effects took a nosedive and just keep rolling with the movie. And also, it feels like there's a movie with a whole bunch going on that didn't really need to be there. I mean, the whole idea of vampire bats setting up a colony out in New Mexico or wherever the hell they are and going apeshit crazy and trying to kill people, that's great. You know, you can just roll with it from there. You didn't need all the extra drama with, you know, Youngman Duran really fighting with the chief of the other tribe about oil companies, because that even never gets resolved. It just kind of just dies out. You never even know how they ended that. It's a storyline that passes away. And then the whole mysticism angle, you almost didn't even need that. It's just kind of like, why is this here? And finally, I always felt a little bit shorted in the David Warner character, just because you're waiting for that moment. Like, this guy has an absolute loathing, hatred for vampire bats. I mean, he is the Van Helsing in this motion picture by any stretch of the imagination. And you're like, what's the motivation? Why does he hate these things? What's the reasoning? And when he gives you a reasoning, you're waiting for, you know, they killed my wife, they attacked my child, something meaningful. And he's just like, they serve no purpose and they're the devil. And you're like, really? That's as good as it got? That's all you can give us? Okay. So with all that, why do I say you should still check this out? Like I said before, yes, it's a great addition to all the other motion pictures of its time, all the other movies about dogs and cats and bugs and rabbits, for Christ's sake, Night of the Lepus, everything that else was going on. But also, it's a movie that strangely tried to punch above what it was really based on. I mean, it literally looks better than it should look. The acting in it is better than it kind of deserves. It tried to be more than just a scary bat movie by putting in all these subplots, most didn't need to be there, and giving you all these multiple layers to the story and giving you all this stuff to elevate it and pick it up from what it really was just a bunch of bats in a cave killing people type of shit. So it really tried to be more than just another silly one of these movies. It tried to be more than just another low-budget schlock flick. It did everything it could to, but it never really achieved a level higher than what it was kind of probably supposed to be in the first place. So that being said, top to bottom, left to right, all is done and over with. Go watch Nightwing. It's a good little decent flick that punches above what it was meant to be. And because of the sheer look and style, kind of makes you think of more of a mainstream movie that went a little bit off than a low-budget movie that reached up and grabbed the stars. You're gonna feel either way about it by the time you get done watching this thing. And let's be honest, sometimes people have been really unfairly harsh on this motion picture, but I've heard the same people that say, Nightwing was kind of a failure and all this, it wasn't that great. Sit there and turn around and sit there and, praise Track of the Moon Beast. Or sit there and say, Legend of Bogey Creek was a masterpiece, which it was, by the way. But they'll sit there and they'll elevate these other movies that really weren't that amazing, and then they'll denigrate this one that at least tried to be amazing. Give it what it is, take it for what it is, and just enjoy it for what it is, and you'll probably have a decent time. What more can you say than that? Anyway, folks, be good. Take care. Stay out of trouble. Be kind to a stranger. Always be there for a friend. Get out and watch Nightwing. It's free on YouTube. But before all other things, never, and I mean ever, take any bullshit from anybody. See you all soon.